looked at the story of the Red Sea crossing, the beginning of the Hebrew people's journey of freedom after 400 years of being enslaved by a powerful empire. God the liberator had set them free. And today we pick up the story about 4 to 6 weeks later. At this point, most of the food that the people were carrying out of Egypt has likely been consumed, and their stomachs are grumbling, and their mouths are also starting to grumble against Moses and against God. So we're going to hear Exodus chapter 16 as read by our friend Maitreya, and he lives in India where it is 5 a.m. right now. So he recorded his reading for us in advance. So Tuesday, if you could... Evan, I think we need to unpin so we can watch this on the screen. Oh, perfect. Yeah. We're going to watch Maitreya read Exodus 16. Oh, one sec. If you could restart Tuesday, we just can't hear it. Need to turn it up, perhaps. Let's try that again.
This is from Exodus chapter 16. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert, which is located
We got it. Thank you.
between Elim and Sinai. They set out on the 15th day of the second month after they had left the land of Egypt. The whole Israelite community complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert. The Israelites said to them, "Oh, how we wish that the Lord had just put us to death while we were still in the land of Egypt. There we could sit by the pots cooking meat and eat our fill of bread. Instead, you've brought us out into this desert to starve this whole assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to make bread rain down from the sky for you. The people will go out each day and gather just enough for that day. In this way, I'll test them to see whether or not they follow my instruction. On the sixth day, when they measure out what they've collected, it will be twice as much as they collected on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the Lord's glorious presence, because your complaints against the Lord have been heard. Who are we? Why blame us?" Moses continued, "The Lord will give you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord heard the complaints you made against him. Who are we? Your complaints aren't against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole Israelite community, 'Come near to the Lord, because he's heard your complaints.'" As Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community, they turned to look toward the desert, and just then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I've heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will have your fill of bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening, a flock of quail flew down and covered the camp. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the desert surface were thin flakes, as thin as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" They didn't know what it was. Moses said to them, "This is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Collect as much of it as each of you can eat, 1 omer, about 2 liters per person. You may collect for the number of people in your household." The Israelites did as Moses said, some collecting more, some less. But when they measured it out by the omer, the ones who had collected more had nothing left over, and the ones who collected less had no shortage. Everyone collected just as much as they could eat. Moses said to them, "Don't keep any of it until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some kept part of it until morning, but it became infested with worms and stank. Moses got angry with them. Every morning they gathered it as much as each person could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, the people collected twice as much food as usual, 2 omers per person. All the chiefs of the community came and told Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of rest. a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. But you can set aside and keep all the leftovers until the next morning. So they set the leftovers aside until morning, as Moses had commanded. They didn't stink or become infested with worms. The next day Moses said, "Eat it today, because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you won't find it out in the field. 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be nothing to gather." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather bread, but they found nothing. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to obey my commandments and instructions? Look, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you enough food for 2 days. Each of you should stay where you are and not leave your place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. The Israelite people called it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and tasted like honey wafers. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept safe for future generations, so that they can see the food that I used to feed you in the desert when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put one full omer of manna in it. Then set it in the Lord's presence, where it should be kept safe for future generations." Aaron did as the Lord commanded Moses, and he put it in front of the covenant document for safekeeping. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years, until they came to a livable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is 1/10 of an ephah.
The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, pop quiz. Around the desert for 40 years. How long do you think it takes to walk the most direct route from the Red Sea to Jerusalem? Any guesses? Like if you just kept walking every day? A couple months? A year, maybe? It's actually 2 to 4 weeks. So if you walked along the coast of the Mediterranean, only 2 to 4 weeks. And even if you do what they did and cross the Sinai Desert, it would only take maybe a couple of months, which is one of the answers we heard. In other words, a whole lot less than 40 years. And I think the reason the story says they wandered 40 years was that God was using that wandering time as a time of retraining a people. Because it takes more than 2 to 4 weeks for a recently enslaved people to walk away from a slavery mindset, to root out the thinking of the empire, and to recalibrate for a whole new way of being. And if you feel like I do about the violent conquest of Canaan, maybe their wandering wasn't even quite long enough to fully cleanse them of the empire's colonial waves. But in this wilderness wandering, this time of training, I believe this is one of God's main training tools, manna. This manna method, I'm calling it, a 40-year-long exercise centered on food, the best kind of exercise in my opinion. The word manna in Hebrew translates to "what is it?" It was a strange substance that they didn't understand that appeared like frost with the dew. Here's something I learned this week while I was researching this sermon. Some people think manna was actually aphid poop. So there's these little scale-like insects that eat the leaves and sap of the tamarisk tree in the Sinai, and then they poop it out at night, all night. I think it's like 130% of their body weight every hour. And it's loaded with sugar, and it gathers at the base of the plants and hardens to form this yellowish kind of granule that melts later in the sun. And the Arab Bedouin people in the Sinai collect it for food. They call it man. Now, this theory does not explain how pure sugar could have provided nutrition for a population for almost 40 years, or how it could have appeared in double amounts on Fridays. But I do kind of love the idea that God basically told people to eat shit. And I love the idea of manna being something kind of ordinary, kind of natural, because it's too easy to make this into a story of a miracle that happened to a bunch of other people way back when. I want us to claim this story for us today. And I want to think, I actually think not just aphid poop, but everything in the food chain is manna, that it's all gift, it's all abundance, all useful for our training. And what I want to suggest to you today is that you and I are also in deep need of this training. We are wandering through a wilderness of a different kind, a wilderness of capitalism and consumerism. It's not even really a wilderness. I think today we're pretty much right smack in the middle of Egypt. We're kind of like right in the heart of the empire. And yet we're called to live in this empire as citizens of another realm, called to make our choices in line with the kingdom of God, to practice living in a world that's coming. Now, my companion on my own manna journey this week has been Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Service Berry, which is amazing. It's very short, easy to read, lots of pictures. It's about indigenous gift economies, about abundance and reciprocity in the natural world. And I think her wisdom is very in line with this manna training I'm talking about. So I'm going to share 4 main points that I think form the backbone of this manna training with some help from Kimmerer's writing. Now, for some unknown reason, these points came to me in the form of words starting with the letter R. This is the old evangelical alliterative preaching trick. And I figured if I'm already, riffing on evangelical preaching methods, I might as well include some fill in the blanks in your bulletins. So listen closely to fill in the 4 R lessons of manna training. And then we'll close with some practical ideas. So at the beginning of this manna story, we have a grumbly people who are pining for the good old days back in Egypt. And I'm tempted to mock them because it seems so ludicrous for recently freed slaves to have rose-colored glasses about the whips and the chains. But really, this is a very human response. And we're seeing it, in the popularity of things like MAGA, where there's a whole group of people who feel understandable fear about their economic insecurity and disenfranchisement, but instead of rising up against the empire that caused it, they look with this kind of false nostalgia on that same empire in vain hope that it will solve the problem that it in fact created. I think sometimes our present anxiety can distort our past memory, and sometimes the devil feels safer than the one you don't. So here's the first R that I'm going to talk about for manna training. God is replacing their fear of scarcity with a relationship of abundance. So I'll read you just a short quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer. She says, "In order for capitalist market economies to function, there must be scarcity. And the system is actually designed to create scarcity where it does not actually exist. Our economy is entirely based on fear of not enough. So was life in Egypt for the enslaved people, no matter how their memories deceived them. But God invites us all to live in a different economy, an economy of trusting in more than enough, based on a God who cares about our well-being." When I listened to this story, I was amazed again at God's response to the people's complaining. He's not angry with them. He actually responds to their grumbling by saying he'll provide for them quail and manna. And to demonstrate God's own trustworthiness to meet their needs, she gives them food every day. And not only that, verses 9 and 10 say that the community was invited to come near to the Lord and to see God's glorious presence. God invites them into a deeper, closer relationship of trust. Now, this trust building is tricky because in our world today, there are many people who don't experience the abundance of God. I think God wants every creature to be provided for, but I don't think God will always intervene with miraculous manna or interrupt bad human choices that block it. So not only is there poverty due to some people hoarding resources, but sometimes even when we do share our resources, like the abundance of food that's been donated at the border of Gaza, that food is still sitting there rotting because humans are blocking it from entering. There's enough on this planet to feed all of us, but because of fear and our responses to it, this food does not always reach those who need it. So I think in this world, it's valid to be afraid that your needs won't be met. But when you feel that fear, the call is to remember the manna training, to lean into relationship, to lean into love and community and interdependence, to move from the house of fear into the house of love. Or to use some of Kimmerer's words, the currency in a gift economy is relationship, expressed as gratitude, as interdependence, and the ongoing cycles of reciprocity. A gift economy nurtures the community bonds that enhance mutual well-being. The economic unit is we rather than I, as all flourishing is mutual. So my second R lesson is receiving all as gift. Under empire, all is commodity. Everything has a price, including enslaved people. And those of us who are not slaves today must work to earn money to get resources. It's all about consumption and control. Yet that's not how we enter the world. Robin talks about how we begin in a maternal gift economy. We don't have to earn or purchase our mother's milk. It's a gift, not a commodity. We are born under a sun that gives us constant energy for free. For the Israelites, manna was training to recognize the world as a gift. It was a daily ritual. They would wake up every morning and just find it there waiting for them, even though they didn't pay for it or earn it. The mercies were new every morning. They were given each day their daily bread. Robin Kimmerer writes about the gift economies that existed and in some cases still exist in several First Nations. Ceremonies like potlatches were about gaining honor through gift giving. My colonial ancestors sadly outlawed these ceremonies in many cases because the ceremonies undermined their ideas of individual property and accumulation. But these practices shaped Indigenous worldviews and cultivated a respect for all creatures. And Kimmerer talks about an example, kind of a hypothetical. She says, conceiving of something as a gift changes your relationship to it in a powerful way, even though the physical makeup of the thing has not changed. So a woolly knit hat that you purchase at the store will keep you warm, regardless of its origin. But if it was hand knit by your favorite auntie, then you are in relationship to that thing in a very different way. You are responsible for it, and your gratitude has a motivating force in the world. You're likely to take much better care of the gift hat than of the commodity hat, because the gift hat is knit with relationships. This is the power of gift thinking. With manna, God was training the Israelites to receive the natural world as a gift, instead of something to be commodified, to make a profit. For Israel and for us, the goal of training in gift-based thinking is to increase both our reverence and our reciprocity. More R words for you there. So Kimmerer asks, what would it be like to consume with the full awareness that we are the recipients of earthly gifts which we have not earned? To consume with humility. We are called to harvest honorably. And then she lists some principles, some Indigenous principles of an honorable harvest, including ask permission before taking and abide by the answer. Never take the first one, never take the last. Never take more than half, leave some for others. Never waste what you've taken. Give thanks for what you've been given, and give a gift in reciprocity for what you've taken. Interesting stuff. So on to my third R phrase. This is a double one, redistributing the resources. So in this manna story, we have this miraculous seeming Omer jar. And no matter how much or how little each person gathered, they would measure it, and it was equitable. It was what each person needed. And if they tried to hoard it and to keep it overnight, it would rot and stink. Man, I wish that manna was still our currency. I wish that the money sitting in bank accounts for Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk overnight would be spoiled and useless for them in the morning. I wish that the coal and the oil that we're fracking out of the ground would rot overnight and force us to get our energy from resources that are new every morning, the sun and the wind. But sadly, we live in a world where hoarding is not only possible, it's seen as advisable, as responsible to store up for the future. Build barns, build pyramids, build big bank accounts where resources will sit and gather dust instead of circulating and being redistributed to those who need them. It doesn't have to be this way. Not all societies are organized around barns and pyramids and bank accounts. Here's a story that Kimmerer tells in her book. She talks about an anthropologist who speaks with a First Nations hunter and who says, given the uncertainty of meat in the forest, why isn't the hunter storing the meat for himself? Which is what the economic system of his home culture would have predicted. And the hunter replied, store my meat? I store my meat in the belly of my brother. In a gift economy, wealth is understood as having enough to share, and the practice for dealing with abundance is to give it away. In fact, status is determined not by how much one accumulates, but by how much one gives away. So the key for this manna lesson is shifting our mindset from mine to ours, because everything is gift. Nothing is truly earned. So we shouldn't feel personal entitlement to the money or the possessions we have. Even if we call them ours, they really belong to God. And God's gifts are meant to circulate, not to concentrate. You need to empty out your Omer jar to let God fill it tomorrow. Okay, here's my fourth and final R phrase. This is a triple trouble. Respecting rhythms of rest. So in this manna story, we see the joining together of two of our shared practices at Open Way, the practice of enough and the practice of Sabbath. The idea of Sabbath first shows up in Genesis chapter 1 when God rests from creation on the seventh day. But this story about manna is the first time in Scripture that we see instructions for people to observe the Sabbath. So why did God give the people double manna on Friday and then nothing on Saturday? I think it was because part of what God is retraining them is in the relationship between work and rest. In Egypt, they were treated like cogs in the machine of empire. Their needs and their well-being meant nothing to that system. Their bodies were only worth anything if they could work. And capitalism can make us feel like that too, that we're only worth what we can do, what we can produce. But when we respect rhythms of rest, when we take Sabbath, this reminds us that in God's eyes, we are not primarily workers. We are children of God. We are here to love God and enjoy what God has made. And sometimes this happens through work, and sometimes it happens through rest. Rest is another gift that our God of love wants us to receive. And trust that even if we slow down, even if we stop, God will provide. So those are my main lessons of the manna training. And these lessons were so crucial that they were taken up by Jesus, who called himself living manna and practiced a shared economy with his disciples. And they were taken up by Paul, who referenced this same story from Exodus 16 when he was encouraging rich churches to share and redistribute resources to poor churches. And I think we can take them up today in this community of practice. We can't fully escape from capitalism, but we can create smaller scale gift economies right inside of it. So before I close, because I've heard so many manna sermons that are too over-spiritualized, I want to give us some very specific ways we might be able to work on training ourselves for the economy that we believe is coming and to live as though it's here already. Now, ideally, we'd be pooling all of our resources into a common purse, and some Christians have done that and continue to do that, but it takes a lot of trust and a lot of commitment, more than I think we've built in this place at this point. So for the present, here are some smaller creative ideas for my fellow manna trainees. Now, I invite you to flip to the back page of your bulletin, or if you're at home, you can find the list of links near the top of my events email today. And you might even want to take a pen or take your phone and write down or put a star next to the points that seem like specific invitations for you, where you hear the Spirit whispering, that's the one that you maybe want to pay attention to. So number one, share within our community through the Open Way Mutual Aid Fund. This is the closest we have to a common purse at Open Way, a chance to redistribute our resources to those who need them. And for some of us, this might be about filling out that application, telling the community and telling God that we are in need. And this can be hard. But as we sang in Lean On Me at the beginning of the service, no one can fill those of your needs if you won't let them show. For others, maybe you're drawn to make a donation to that fund. You can give a check or send an e-transfer to info@openwaychurch.ca with mutual aid fund in the line item. And another great way to share with the community is to bring food for the community food pantry outside. It's kind of like the food bank, but it's on the honor system, and it means people can access it even if they don't have ID. Number 2, examine your own relationship to money as a way to keep up the training. There's something I linked in the email called the Money Autobiography Guide, and it's from the Faith and Money Network, which is a rad organization. And it asks you questions to help you unpack how your perspectives on money have started in your childhood and how they've changed over time. It helps demystify where you're at with it and identify where your values and intentions can align with your actions. Number 3, give away excess possessions. Spring cleaning season. It's a great time to go through your closet and your house to see what you're keeping around but not using. In other words, find any manna that you might be hoarding that could rot over the summer. Because remember, everything belongs to God, and God lets us take care of things for a while, but if we're not using them, God might want someone else to have them. So you can donate things to thrift stores. Janet told me this week that Wish, the sex workers organization downtown, is taking gently, minimally used healthcare products, facial makeup products, things like that. You could host a clothing swap, use your local Buy Nothing group or a free table, or give to a tool library or a book library so things can be held communally. Join a bike co-op or a car co-op and share things. And if you feel like you've got a long mental list of things you'd really like to buy, I suggest a sort of purchasing Sabbath, taking a little break before you buy something. So I knew somebody who would regularly practice waiting a week before buying something, even a small thing. And she would actually try to listen and see if there would be a way that could be provided for her in a different way. And at times that would happen, and she would, find it on a free table or something like that. But other times the delay would make her realize maybe I don't need this as much as I thought. Number 4 is paying a land tax to local indigenous nations. So my favorite thing about regularly saying land acknowledgements and acknowledging that, at least in BC here, we live on stolen land, is that I get reminded all the time that this doesn't belong to us. So have you ever considered giving something as reparations or even as rent payments to the people who have tended these lands for millennia and who still suffer the generational impacts of colonialism? This is one of the ways we can practice land back right now and honor the people who give us wisdom like this. This year, Open Way is using a website called Reciprocity Trusts to calculate a land tax to pay back to local indigenous nations. And you can use their online tool to calculate an amount and then get in touch with your local nation and figure out how to give money to their band office or pay it forward to a local indigenous nonprofit. These next 2 have to do with that problem I talked about earlier about blocks to resources for people in need and removing those blocks. So first is divesting. If we've got some excess manna stored up in a bank account, we want to make sure it's at very least doing good in the community while it's sitting there, rather than funding fossil fuel extraction or weapons for genocide. And sadly, most of Canada's major banks invest in both of those things. And it can feel like a big hassle to change over to a credit union, but there are tools like the one I linked in the email that can take you through step by step. Denise and I switched our accounts over to Van City back in 2019, which was, I think, the last time I preached on a similar topic, and we've had 0 regrets since then. And while we're talking about divestments, let's talk about the next point, which is about boycotting. BDS, boycott, divest, and sanctions. It's one of the best tools we have to create change around things like genocide and fossil fuels. And it's mostly just about making smart decisions when buying and making sure we don't buy products that enable apartheid regimes. And you can use apps like Boycat when you're shopping, or consult the Canadian BDS list for brands to avoid. We're doing this as a church when we make purchases for Open Way as part of our apartheid-free pledge, but you can do this on a personal level too. It's a way of using really conscious consumption as one of our best collective tools to try to end a genocide. And finally, if you only click on one link, I included a link to a website that radicalized me. It helps you visualize, using pixels on a screen, exactly how much manna is being hoarded by billionaires. Seeing the scale of this made me realize that it's my duty as a follower of Christ to advocate against the existence of billionaires, to advocate for a maximum wage, for higher taxes for the ultra-rich. And I hope that it radicalizes you too and maybe gives you creative ideas about how to organize to stop this kind of hoarding. So maybe you felt an inner nudge around one or more of these ideas, or maybe there are other creative ideas stirring for you. I think talking about money can be awkward at first, but I'd love for us to get better at sharing our ideas with each other, to inspire creativity and mutual accountability. Ched Myers, a theologian, says that talking about our money deprivatizes our anxieties and communitizes our imagination. So for example, I'd love to see people who have inheritances or generational wealth chatting together at Open Way about ways to use that ethically. And I'd love to see people who live paycheck to paycheck or who depend on the legislated scarcity of welfare or disability payments to share sources that they found for aid, or to share ways to resist scarcity mindsets even when scarcity feels all too real and scary. And I'd love to see people who work multiple jobs talk about how the heck they practice Sabbath while trying to juggle all of that, or how they budget when income is uncertain from month to month. I think the Spirit will take us down different paths in regard to our money and our stuff, but even if our paths look different, it doesn't mean we have to walk alone. As a community, we can do this manna training together with the wisdom of Scripture and the wisdom of Indigenous teachers. Together we can build relationships of loving interdependence. We can practice seeing everything as manna, as gift. We can practice storing our excess in the belly of our sibling and remind each other that we're worth more than what we produce. We can rest together. So as we close, let's just take a few moments now in silence to rest, to let this settle, and we'll sing a simple song together.